So today we've got a presentation on fire and smoke curtains, and we're going to run through some step change improvements, third-party certification and regulations. So just a quick introduction. My name is Charles Devenish. I'm the Managing Director of Adexon Fire and Smoke Curtains. This is our mission and vision. So our mission is to foster industry-wide innovation and improve performance and reliability, also whilst ensuring that third-party certification and certified products, third-party certified products and legal compliance become the norm. They're not always the norm currently. And our vision is one of sort of looking out, you might say. We're looking to make the UK the global leader in active fire and smoke curtains, and that's through quality, innovation, raising performance expectations, and continually improving. This is our charter. This is what guides us day to day. So legal, certified and better. Just to run over that briefly. So legal is products that are covered by a harmonised standard. Many of you might be aware of this, are legally required to be CE marked. Ours are. That's part of our charter, our guarantee to you. Certified. All our products are third party certified, which we think is mandatory for life safety products. And then better is we can demonstrate tangible benefits of our product design. The main one being the guide design that we use, and we'll run through that shortly. So today we've got a stand, so you can come over and talk to us afterwards if you've got any questions. There's myself, and I'm joined by Jack, one of our business development executives. And the key takeaways of this presentation are, there's three key takeaways. Number one is that fire curtains are brilliant products. They've been around as a product for maybe 40 years, and people that are familiar with them may have had headaches with them. We'll run over some of those today and how they've been solved. But especially if you're an architect or a designer and you're looking to open up a space and you want to have like an airy feel to a space, then fire curtains enable you to do that and still maintain compartmentation in a fire. They give you flexibility with design, enable you to remove walls and avoid having to put in doors and fire-rated partitions. Key takeaway number two is don't be sold the old, and we'll go into a bit more detail on this shortly. But it is old designs of fire curtains that give headaches and have traditionally made fire curtains almost a choice of last resort for some people using them because of these headaches. We've resolved those, and we'll go over that shortly. And takeaway number three is don't chance it. So all vertical fire curtains are legally required to be CE marked to harmonised standard BSEN 16034 since November 19. This is a requirement of the construction product regulations, which as a country we signed up to in 2013. And you know what we say is don't be talked into disregarding this. You know, some people might say there's very few prosecutions under the CPR. Well, you know, that's a risk that I wouldn't want to go to sleep on. Just because, you know, if you become the first person, it's not good. Penalties for breach of the CPR do include imprisonment and fines, and you could also end up accumulating a legacy issue with uninsurable buildings or insurance being void in the event of a fire. You know, the insurers might not say anything to you, but then in the event of a fire, they may do a check of paperwork and find that you've got a non-compliant product that could create a serious issue. And valid third-party certification, again, is don't chance it. We'd say it's nearly as imperative as legal compliance for a life safety product such as a fire curtain. People can say, well, you know, we're a reputable manufacturer, but we've all seen with the Grenfell inquiry how, you know, some of the mega manufacturers in the industry like Kingspan and others, just forget the other names now, but some of the really big manufacturers have been seen to doing things that aren't going to be best for you as a buyer. With third-party certification, you've got that risk taken away, that you've got a notified body such as Warrington Fire or IFC or APLUS. They're actually accredited by the likes of UCAS, and they will go in with third-party certification. They actually go into our facility or the manufacturer's facility, and they'll carry out an audit on production and make sure that what we're producing week in, week out is actually the same as what was tested all those months or even years ago. And they'll make sure that what's arriving on site is that it's got the same components, same design, and follows the same process through manufacture. Without third-party certification, the risk for verifying that sits with you as a buyer or specifier. So what is a fire curtain? Some of you may be familiar with this. There's one of our sort of easy descriptions for what is a fire curtain. We say it's a modern form of a roller shutter. which you may be familiar with. A goalpost arrangement, there's a barrel over the top, which will have a curtain wrapped around it, and 80% of the fire curtain market is those vertical fire curtains, which you'll see on the right hand side there. And they will slide down a couple of like goalposts, which are the guide rails. One of the benefits with fire curtains over roller shutters is, well, a couple of them are they're lighter weight, and they're more compact in design, so they take up less space when you're trying to conceal them in ceiling voids, and they don't require as much secondary steel work and structural support. There's also additional configurations available. So as you can see here in the central picture, we've got horizontal fire curtains. So if you want to separate between floors, if you have an open atria, you can do that with fire curtains. Obviously something that was not available with fire shutters previously. And then concertina fire curtains are very useful. We've got some of these going in at Liverpool Football Club at the moment, and they have them in high-end residential around staircases. If you essentially want to provide protection of an area, but you don't want any guide rails, so like at Liverpool Football Club, they've got some servery areas, but they don't want to have guide rails and posts because there's a heavy footfall on match days. So the concertina is like an accordion, and it will just fold up into the ceiling, out of sight, hopefully all the time, apart from the weekly fire tests. So why fire curtains? They're great for enabling open plan designs. If you're an architect or a designer, they're less destructive once activated. So you might compare them with a sprinkler system, and we see sprinklers are great for what they do, but they obviously are very destructive when they're activated, maybe by mistake. You can do partial activation. They're easier to fit. They're very easy to fit in and design in. Some very high performances available. So we've got up to 120 minutes EW, which is integrity and radiation, and up to 3 hours EI, which is integrity and insulation for those that are familiar with the European classifications, and there are many applications and use of them. Some of the benefits, they can be face fixed, that we've already touched on, compact lightweight design, enabling open plan designs and less building work. Just on that key takeaway number 2 that we touched on, don't be sold the old. This is the traditional way that fire curtains were designed, and many manufacturers on the market today are still using this design, what you can see in the middle. So if you cut through one of the guide rails, which the fabric will slide down each side of the opening, the fabric is retained using a nut and a bolt or a popper. This is the traditional way of doing fire curtains, and that's great in a laboratory setting where you can set everything up perfectly. The trouble is out on site where they may be installed slightly less perfectly, and also with fabric not being a rigid material, it will move and wander. That the bolt will, and what we see regularly, which gives the headaches, is this bolt will actually be dragged into the aperture, and metal on metal jams. Also with the nut and bolt and the popper, you've got penetration of the fabric, which is a weakness. And you can imagine if I put a hole in my shirt or what have you, it's only a matter of time before you'll end up with a rip or a tear, and you can see that with the image on the left. What you've also got with this design, this old design, is the nuts and bolts or the poppers. They're only every, say, 500mm or 200mm, so you've actually got gaps in between those retention bolts. What this has accentuated, this problem with the gaps, is when the fabric tears and that popper will fall away. And as I say, we see this on a weekly basis around the UK. We realised some 5 years ago as a company that if fire curtains were to realise their true potential, we needed to overcome these 3 main headaches. Otherwise, people, architects and building owners and clients would keep using them as a product last resort. So we set 2, and after about 12 months of many iterations, we'll come back to that in a minute, we came up with this guide design, which we refer to it as the new design, but it's actually quite old now. It's 5 years, as I say, in the making. It's tested and third-party certified. And it's been referred to, we've had it at some of the events this year and earlier, where some people, their words, not ours, it's genius. So it's people that are familiar with fire curtains and have the problems with them jamming and tearing, they see this design and it answers all those issues. So we've got a continuous retention pole in the side guide. We've not got any of that puncturing of the fabric. We've not got the gaps in between the retention points. And we've got no travelling components, fasteners, which can jam into the guide. So it really does solve all those headaches. We'll just go back to the old design just so you can see it. But it's that's what you'll see traditionally. And this is what we've come up with, say, some years ago now. And we just realised these headaches needed to be overcome if it was worth investing heavily, which we have done subsequently, in the product and in the market. and we see massive potential and in the applications that these can be used in. I'm just going to go back quickly to another feature of the old design that a lot use in the UK is, and you'll see on the where it points to less than 5 minutes in a fire, that's pointing to the smoke seals. So a lot of fire curtains are also tested for smoke performance, and the test is 1634 Part 3, which is a cold smoke test. We're actually being asked by BSI to join some of the national committees because they've noticed some of the work we've been doing around tests and standards, and we're pushing for higher performance. We actually believe the smoke test should be a hot smoke test. Obviously in a fire you do get some cold smoke, but the biggest killer and the biggest cause of damage and harm to people and property is hot smoke and gases, and the current test, 1634 Part 3, only tests for cold. That's why you'll see this design on the market with the cold smoke seal. So that smoke seal works. It's a polypropylene filament strip. It's used on fire doors. On a fire door, it is used in conjunction with an intumescent strip. So on a fire door, you'll have the cold smoke seal, which will melt at about 170 degrees C. And then the intumescent strip will take over at 180. So you've got pretty much contiguous protection from smoke. The trouble is on a fire curtain, you can't have an intumescent strip because the problem is if that intumescent strip activates, it then prevents deployment and you've not got the fire barrier at all. So manufacturers and ourselves, up to 5 years ago, use these cold smoke seals. Some use even draft excluders, but they don't last. If you look on the graph there, that's the heat curve, which is the test in 1363, which is the conditions for the fire test, which all fire tests lean on basically. And what you can see is after 5 minutes, the temperature's 576, I think it is, degrees C. Those cold smoke seals have long since gone, and we're talking of only, minutes into a test of a product that's designed to last for an hour or two. So what we've done, another feature, as you can see there, where we say fire-resistant components for smoke control, we've actually used the fire-resistant fabric that is tested to 1000 degrees C, and we've used that to achieve the smoke control as well. And again, this is all third-party tested and certified. So we're moving on. We're not waiting for the standard to be revised. That will happen, and we're pushing for that, and we will be part of that. But in the meantime, we've moved on with our design and had it tested. Just a quick one. I don't know, you could put your hands up really. Who knows the difference between a product standard and a product test? No, it's okay. They're words that are used interchangeably. They're two very different things. So a product test is like we've touched on. A fire test is a product test. The smoke test is another example. The cycle test for our product they're all examples of product tests. A product standard is better because it's essentially an umbrella standard that brings together a number of complementing tests that suit a product, and then you get a much more holistic assessment of the product and how that will work in its real life application. So, for example, a fire curtain will have a fire test to 1634 Part 1. It'll also be tested to smoke to 1634 Part 3. It'll also be tested to the cycles. So ours is tested from 500 cycles up to 10,000, which I think is category 1. And then other tests as well. And they're all, basically, it's a much more rounded view of the product. What we do see is some people selling fire curtains, and it's more in the horizontal fire curtain part of the market, where it is a very niche market, and there's obviously a lot of investment in doing all the tests, and some people put a horizontal fire curtain on the market just with a fire test. It doesn't have a product standard third-party certification. So just touch on BS476, because this is much far reaching than just fire curtains, so it might be more relevant to some of you than just fire curtains. So the Building Safety Act, you may have seen, there's out for consultation at the moment, is a removal of BS476 from use. And it's a general direction of travel, really, is what we're seeing is with BS476 is a move towards European standards and classifications in the place of British standards. And it is one of the results of Grenfell, so there's a tightening up on standards and competency. And what we know, we've actually known this for 20 years as a country, and it's not a great reflection on us that we've held on to BS476. So we've known since 2000 that the European fire test is a more rigorous test. So just as an example, the plate thermometer used in the European fire test, 1634 Part 1, will mean that the product tested has up to 30% greater thermal exposure. So we could get our fire curtain tested to BS476 and we could achieve a 60-minute rating, or a competitor could. Ours was tested to the European fire test and classification system, 60 minutes. you could take a product tested under BS476, put it through the European test, and it might only achieve 45 minutes. Obviously, that's critically important if you are a fire engineer and you are doing a strategy and you're looking for 60 minutes of integrity and you're using the European classification and standards. You could allow, or somebody could put in a BS476 tested 60-minute fire door, or any product. As I say, BS476 applies widely, and it might only give you 45 minutes against what your strategy is designed for. The European standards classification are very rigid and rules-based. They use calculation methods and expert judgments that are already agreed upon and written down in a SEN standard. So what we've allowed under the BS476 is, I think it's the Passive Fire Protection Forum Code of Practice, where it's a little bit like, we've got a product here that's tested under 476, but we've got some variations to the product. We're using some different components, or we're using some sizes that aren't tested. What we've traditionally allowed in this country, which we're not advocates of, is to call in a fire engineer and, in the reality, day to day on site, a lot of pressure. We've got a hand over here, the contractor calls them in and says, we've got a hand over here. Is this fire door going to be okay? We've varied it here and here. Your expert judgment, is that okay? And it's very much an on the day assessment, and yeah, that's okay, and it passes. The European system is a lot more predefined and much more rigid boundaries. It's more conservative too, which obviously as a fire product and system is definitely better to err on the side of caution, and removes those likelihood assessments we just referred to that we see on the site assessments, and yeah, we think this should be okay. The European standards get rid of that, and we're a big advocate of only installing what's been tested. Okay, big investment on the part of us manufacturers, but we've seen it in security for years where if you want to use, if you're familiar with LPCB and LPS 1175 standards for security doors, if you want to have a door a certain size with a certain vision panel and a certain lock and a certain hinge, you have to have all that tested to get the certification. How much more so for a fire product where lives are dependent on it? With that security products stop you breaking in, we're talking about life safety products. So we think it's a move in the right direction, only allowing tested products. And we've already touched on the greater thermal exposure in the European test. How this is relevant to fire curtains is, you may be familiar with BS 8524 Part 1, which is a British standard relating to fire curtains. It's actually recently lost its notified body backing, so it's no longer available with third-party certification, which is really a pause on the standard, if not potentially an end to it. But one of the downsides of it has 30 references to BS 476 in it. We have, as a company, have moved with the European standards some years ago. So none of our fire tests are to that BS 476. And some people will say there's confusion in the market. We don't believe there is. The only benefit of talking up confusion in regulations around fire curtains is to serve to keep older products and older standards current. And, that's not good. We don't feel that's good for the consumer and for fire safety per se. We're governed by the construction product regulations, like it or not, since 2013 up to today, and looking well into the future. We're governed by the CPR. And the acid test under the CPR is if a product is covered by a harmonised standard, you shall CE mark to it. There's no grey area. There's no debate on that. If a product is covered by a harmonised standard, you have to CE mark to that harmonised standard. It's not good enough just to CE mark to the machinery directive. You have to CE mark to that harmonised standard. And the only harmonised standards available for fire curtains, and it applies to vertical fire curtains, is BSEN 16034. People might plead for a transition period, to come across to it, but we've actually known since 2016. We've had plenty of notice. Since 2016, we've known, since it was cited in the official journal of the European Union, 16034, we knew that was going to become harmonised 3 years later after the coexistence period, which it did. There was some pushback in this country on that becoming harmonised and covering fire curtains, because as a country we wanted to protect, did we want to protect BS 8524? Let's put it as a question. Essentially, accepting the harmonised standard meant the shelving, essentially, of the British standard. So the group of notified bodies for the Construction Product Regulation Steering Group 06, in November 2018, at their 19th meeting, There'd been some, they determined that it was possible to C-mark operable fabric curtains as they're described to 16034. There were some attempts, as I say, by some of this country to refute that, and that was, as all reasonable national committees and European committees would do so. They listened to the case, the argument, but they determined after that, they said no, it does apply, and it is becoming harmonised and going to become legally required under the CPR. So from the 1st of November, already touched on, we knew since October 16. And the British Standards Institute, we talk to them regularly. We've been invited onto a number of national committees, BS 9999, BS 9991, BS 8524 Part 1, an international standard ISO 21524, which applies to fire curtains. We actually think they need to do more in making people aware that following a British standard, they have this disclaimer, if you like, or awareness note in their standard. They say, look, standards aren't the same as regulations. Following a standard isn't going to guarantee you within the laws, and complying with the British standard doesn't confer immunity on you from regulations. The trouble is, we did a poll on LinkedIn earlier this year. We had over 12,000 impressions. We had 162 votes, and they were all very relevant people in the industry. And we basically said, if there's a conflict between guidance, such as British standards, that's what they are, they're just guidance, and regulations, such as the CPR or the FSO 2005, Fire Safety Order 2005, or building regulations, if there's a conflict between guidance and regulations, which one do you follow? Do you follow the guidance? Do you follow the regulations? Or does it depend on certain details? And 79% of people in the industry got it wrong. 79% of people in the industry didn't choose regulations all the time. It's when we say it, it's very obvious, but the number one consideration for all of us is we comply with the law, and guidance is guidance, and it's no more than that. It's great, and it should help us to fulfill the legislation. It doesn't always. Sometimes conflict, and when there is conflict, we need to make sure we're following the regulations, and that's why BSI have these notes in there. So we have this little hierarchy of considerations when you're looking at buying or specifying everything. We say the number one consideration is legal compliance, and on that note, vertical fire curtains, legal compliance dictates using BSCN 16034. Valid third-party certification, we say, is the second consideration. That's what we talked about earlier about the risk and production being actually checked on a regular basis by an independent notified body, rather than just taking a commercially driven manufacturer's word for it. And if we're using third-party certification as a determinant, then ISO 21524 is the standard you need to use for horizontal fire curtains, and 16034 back to that standard for concertina fire curtains. And then your third consideration is everything else. So we could talk about, we've got the best design of fire curtain in the UK, and service levels, etc., and they're all very good and very important, but almost talking against ourselves is number one, you need to make sure of legal compliance, and number two, from a risk management perspective, you need to make sure that you're buying specifying products with valid third-party certification. So what about BS 8524? It's been a standard that's been very heavily used in this country. As I say, we created it as a country, BS 8524. We're proud of it. It was the first product standard. We touched on product standards earlier. First product standard in the world that was dedicated to fire curtains. That could, as well as being a strength, could be its actual weakness, in the sense that fire curtains are a very niche market. Notified bodies who do testing and certification are commercial entities like anybody else, and they need to make money. Having a standard dedicated to a very niche product where there's very few players in just the UK territory means, is there enough business? Is there enough demand to justify a notified body supporting that standard? What we've actually seen is Warrington Fire pull out, and we've seen IFC pull out, and there's no notified bodies currently supporting it. There's talk by those that like 8524 of more notified bodies coming on board. That may happen. It may never happen. It's talk. What we know is, what we have to go by is today is what's valid and current today. And if you look in the harmonised standard that we refer to, 16034, which covers fire curtains and doors and other products, it actually states in the harmonised standard forward, it says this European standard should be given the status of a national standard, and conflicting national standards shall be withdrawn at latest October 18. So we've spoken to BSI about this and said, look, 8524 should have been withdrawn from the market. It's quite clearly a conflicting standard. with 16034, give us an example of two standards that are, if 16034 and 8524 aren't conflicting, give us an example of two standards that are, and where they differ technically than how these two cross over so much. 8524 and 16034 have both got the same fire test, both got the same smoke test, both do the same cycle test. They're both for vertical fire curtains. They have differences, but there's so much crossover that they're quite clearly conflicting standards. So 8524, it never reached harmonized status, so it can't offer you a route to C marking, and currently it doesn't have third-party certification. And we hear advocates of the standard as say people that have invested in it, many years ago and haven't moved over to the European standard yet. They will still talk about it and say it's got beneficial tests, and it's referred to in 9999, and we even heard somebody saying it's referred to in the new draft of 9991. If you speak to BSI, they'll say you should never refer to a draft, because the reality is it goes out for public consultation, and then the committees look at it, and I would say it'll be removed before it gets to publication. But the point is it's not. You shouldn't be referring to a draft. Let's have a little look at a comparison between the two. So this is a technical comparison between BS 8524 Part 1 and BSCN 16034. So might be a little bit too small. You can find this on our website afterwards, but we've got a whole list of details. So, for example, the first one is, does the standard insist on the superior European standards and classifications, such as the fire test? 8524 doesn't. 16034 does. So I have to tick for 16034. Does it insist on an extended application system? Again, 8524 doesn't. It allows the likelihood on site in the moment sort of assessments, whereas 16034 you have to follow the EXAP process. The impact test 8524 has. I'm not going to run through all these. Under 16034 you have to do that under a separate harmonized standard 1192. So there's two or three benefits. We'll look at those in a bit more detail here. So what are the beneficial tests? Let's be fair and reasonable and look at 8524. Is there any benefits? And there's two or three benefits. So there's the gravity fail-safe test, requirement, short circuit test, and control descent speed. None of these are unique to 8524, and we'd advocate any responsible manufacturer to take these separately, as we saw with the previous table, as they are available under other standards. So these three benefits are no, you might say, justification or reason to really continue using a standard that has no notified body support, doesn't offer a route to legal compliance. The downsides are more extensive when compared. There's a number in 8524, there's a number of what we would say superfluous, certainly inferior and arguably dangerous tests. So we've got an article on the website about, for example, the hot motor test. So under 8524, they have a hot motor test. We'd actually say, and basically what it essentially says is the fire curtain shall be able to operate when the temperature is 400 degrees C. We actually say that's a dangerous test as it stands, without a lot more control measures in place. To be able to open a fire curtain at 400 degrees C, you're potentially not only endangering the user of the fire curtain, but you're also potentially endangering the whole building. We know that the fire services don't train anything over 195 degrees C. Just to give you a bit of context on what 400 is as a temperature. But there's to be able to open that fire curtain, it's a dangerous test, and that's actually in 8524. You can read more about that on the website. So 9999, we've got a quote here from the Grenfell Tower inquiry from Richard Millett. He was the KC lead counsel for the inquiry, and in his closing statements, he actually referred to outdated guidance as a contributory factor to the Grenfell tragedy. He said behind all of these discrete factors, there lay complex and opaque piecemeal legislation and an over-reliance by law and policymakers on guidance. That includes the likes of BS 9999, some of which, including statutory guidance, was ambiguous, dangerously out of date, and much of which was created by non-governmental bodies and influenced by commercial interests. So quite a strong condemnation there of leaning on guidance that's maybe out of date, maybe influenced by commercial interest, influenced by non-governmental bodies. And as Dem Judith Hackett has said in her interim report, I think it was, is we see people in the industry, which is not a good reflection, is gaming the system, she says. So, we'll see people that will quote something that suits their product or the way they want to do business, and they'll offset that against, what's clearly regulations and what's more current. That's, yeah, Richard Millett pronounced on that. You'll see that 9999 was published in 2017, which is a code of practice for fire safety and design management, etc. Since then, 16034 became harmonised and remained the only harmonised standard, so that straight away outdated 9999, and 8524 third-party certification was withdrawn, and any fire industry professional would say, that renders it non-usable when there is an alternative that is third-party certified. So is BS 8524 Part 1 gone for good? Well, it's being considered for revision at the moment. As a company, we've made extensive comments on improvements. If it's going to come back out, if it does come back out, it won't be the same as 8524 as you know it, the 2013 revision. There's a high probability it won't come back out. Obviously, there's a lot of influencers and people who have invested in the standard pushing for it to be retained. But if that conflict of national standards test is applied to it, it really is incumbent on BSI to withdraw it, so there wouldn't even be a revision. If it does survive that, though, and is somehow justified as not conflicting, it may come out as revised very differently. It may then obtain accreditation. Basically the way it works, you may be familiar with this, but if we as a manufacturer decide that the new BS 8524, we want to certify our products to that, we would go to a notified body such as Warrington Fire or International Fire Consultants. We'd say, can you create a scheme for this product standard? They would then look at a commercial case for it and their own bandwidth in terms of developing schemes for products. If they ticked all those boxes, they would then they'd develop that, take it to a accreditation body such as UCAS. They would accredit the certification scheme, and then the notified body can come back to us and offer certification. A very long process. It's not a 5 minutes. So BS 8524 is a standard. People say it's coming back. Those advocates of the standard do. I wouldn't even say it's potentially going to be months. It could be in the years. And obviously there's millions of pounds of fire curtains going in the meantime. So we need to go by current standards with valid third party certification. So in summary, some of the most common fire curtain problems are resolved with the modern design that's available. On that, we haven't protected that. We haven't patented it. People have said to us, well, why not? The UK market at the moment for fire curtains probably is maybe 25-30 million, relatively small. We actually think if we can elevate fire curtains from a product of last resort, people have traditionally had headaches with them and stayed away from them. If we can resolve those headaches and all manufacturers adopt a better design, it's actually good. It's a win not just for the industry. Industry could become worth 100 million because a lot more people are suddenly using them. It's also a win for consumer and fire safety. And we as a manufacturer will obviously benefit from that. So, we've got a fairly broad-minded view on that. We're saying to our competitors, essentially, look, take the design, use it. It's infinitely better, you might say, significantly better at least than the old design. It gets rid of those headaches. Another point is that, the CPR is illegal. Under the CPR, it's a legal requirement to CE mark to a harmonised standard, and just following a guidance standard doesn't keep you within the laws on its own. Hierarchy considerations is legal compliance, valid third-party certification, and then everything else, all the design benefits we've spoken about and touched on. BS 8524 Part 1 should not be used for vertical fire curtains as it conflicts with harmonised standard 16034. 9999 is an example of outdated guidance referred to in the Grenfell inquiry. Third-party product certification isn't a panacea on its own. Do your due diligence, check the product. And then the main three key takeaways are fire curtains are brilliant products. Please don't be put off by old designs and the headaches associated with those. We can show you plenty of installations where these headaches are overcome and the product features. Don't be sold the old. Don't be talked into it, and don't chance it. Insist on third-party certification, and make sure you're using legally compliant products. And we've got a couple of QR codes. Anyone wants to scan these in, or you can come across and see us afterwards on the table. So we have a REBA accredited CPD. We're big advocates of continual professional development and educating and making people aware. So that's a free CPD you can have in person, and then follow us on LinkedIn or subscribe to our Fire Safety Insights monthly newsletter. So that's our presentation for today on fire and smoke curtains. Hope it's been of some use, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. You might need to come a little bit closer. Yeah, very good. Yeah. Come and use the mic. I think we've got I don't know. Have we got a minute, Andy, or 1 minute? Yeah. Please. Yeah, go for it.
It's important for manufacturer side to hear your view, let's say, on whether the 476 BS476 test should be used as well, or should the manufacturers from their side start pushing towards taking out the 476 from harmonized standards? And from guidance. Harmonized standards obviously are from.
If your questions if we think BS476 should be kept hold of, there's the answer is no. No, we should have moved over to 20 years ago. We've had a bit of a protectionist view. Some in the UK, we've basically protected our own manufacturers because they're all tested to 476. That has not actually helped us on an international perspective or platform, if you like. We're all, okay. It means that our manufacturers can keep selling to the old tests and what have you. But we need to move on. European, competitors have moved ahead as a result of having a better product standard, essentially, that they're having to use to. We should have, let's say 20 years ago, we should have just said, look, guys, let's have a transition period. If we need it to be 2-3 years, so be it. But today in 2023, we should be saying 12 months is more than enough as a transition period. Move across to the European standards and classifications, straight away. Does that answer your question? Very good. Well, thanks for listening, and I hope you found it of some value. And if you've got any questions, please come across and see us. Thank you.